everyone. Welcome back to another episode. Well, actually, this is the first one that I've done. Oh, wait, no, I lied. I did one on Loki, but that was a me just because I love Loki so much and I am like super biased. Actually, I'm going to be biased on this one too. I love this character a lot too. But this is the first one where I do have another mental health provider with me. Last time, I think it was just my brother, and he was just kind of like, hearing everything I already loved about Loki. But today we're going to talk about a character from Avatar: The Last Airbender, and we are going to basically analyze his, I guess, life. And yeah, we're just going to geek out about Avatar and mental health in general. So welcome to another episode. I forgot to introduce myself, so I'm going to do it now. I am Dr. Elizabeth Sanchez-Arvizo from Psychology for Geeks, and today I have...
I am Mark Davis. I'm a mental health counselor in Long Island, New York, and another geeky therapist. And I'm really excited to really dive deep into Iroh from a psychological perspective.
Yes. So one thing that, if you missed it, I interviewed Mark before, actually, and we also geeked out about Avatar for about half of the episode. But we do have a lot of cool things that we discussed in that video. So if you missed it, go back and check it out. And then come back and watch this video again.
Yeah, and maybe, hey, if people like it, maybe we'll do more of it.
Yes. Okay, so I love Avatar: The Last Airbender. I think I started when I was in high school. That's when I started watching it. I watched the whole thing with all of my siblings and a cousin of mine before the We Don't Talk About movie came out. And then after that, it was just like pretty much every year. It just became a comfort show. And the more I guess level up in terms of like my mental and my psychology skills or like knowledge, like the more I appreciated the show. So what was your beginning with Avatar? Like, how did you get hooked on it?
Yeah, so when it first came out, like on TV, like weekly, so I wasn't actually keeping up with it. Like I knew it was kind of popular, but like I wasn't super into it. I watched an episode here and there, but it was like they were like this disparate. Like I wasn't watching it fully.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was only like maybe a year or two ago that my girlfriend and I were like, you know what? Let's watch a show together. Like, oh, people say Avatar's good. Let's watch Avatar.
Mm-hmm.
So we're watching like, holy shit, this is really fucking good. So I am a little embarrassed to say that I only really got into it, maybe joined the fandom only like within the past like couple of years, if that.
No, you know what? That reminds me of a thing. There's a meme out there actually where it's like Iroh and Zuko talking to each other, and they're like, "Uncle, all these people are joining the fandom," and then Iroh's like, everyone is welcome to the fandom. So like, it doesn't matter like how you came about it. You're here now, and that's what's important.
No,
And
100%.
I mean, I'm not sure if you are quite aware of this, or if people out there are aware of it, but once you join the fandom, you can never leave. Like
It's
you're
like the
here for
mob.
life. You're not allowed. You're
Like
here
the
for
mob.
life.
Damn. Okay.
So okay, there's a lot of Avatar stuff out there. We are going to actually wait a minute. Have you seen Korra as well, or did you watch the original?
Okay, so I watched the first season of Korra. It didn't really grab me. I gave the second season like 2 or 3 episodes. It didn't grab me, and I dropped it.
Okay, so I finished watching it, but I've only seen it once, like a long time ago. So I don't remember much. I do remember Uncle Iroh makes a couple of appearances there, I think. My memory
I
is
think in the
fuzzy.
spirit world, if I remember correctly,
I
the
think
spirit
so,
realm.
yeah. So all right, let's just kind of like get started with
Just
like
jump
what
into it.
we remember of like his life, which is not much. Uh because we don't have the other much information about him, like
No,
growing up or anything like that. You
no. I
sure?
mean, what I do remember from the show, and I mean, I know you're much bigger into this movie. You remember it better than me. I remember like this one scene where there's him and soon to be Fire Lord Ozai. They're kneeling in front of their father, the current Fire Lord, and that's when the war is raging. When I guess there's really this either the start or the real pickup to the Fire Nation really dominating the various kingdoms, various nations. I think that's the earliest scene we have of him. I think.
I think so too. And then okay, so we're gonna start about we are gonna, in a sense, like psychoanalyze him a little bit and what he was like. And then you brought that up before we started recording, talking about like how he was brought up like at the height of like, you know, the Fire Nation like advancing and stuff. And then I'm
Hmm.
like, we don't have any information as to what their dad was like, because everybody's like, oh, why did what's his name, uh Masuka's
Ozai?
dad's name, Ozai.
Oh, Ozai, yeah.
He's so unimportant. I'm like, I don't even
Mark,
anyway,
Mark,
like
Mark
what,
Hamill. Mark Hamill voices him. Of
I
course it's
know,
important.
like he's so good, but also like, you know, he's so evil because he's so good, you know.
Just as
Anyway,
just as an aside for a second, like when I heard Ozai talk, I'm like, I recognize that voice. There, it can't be. There's no way that's Mark Hamill. And I'm like, holy shit, that's Mark Hamill.
no, dude, every time I watch it, I completely forget it's Mark Hamill. I'm just like, he's so good at what he like, you know, at it. And then I'm like, and then I watch something, or like my brother's like, can you believe that's Mark Hamill? And I was like, no, because I totally forgot again that that's him. Because like I'm
It's
like,
the
I have
Joker.
to
It's Luke
know.
Skywalker.
Yeah, it's just like
He's
in my
really good.
brain,
He's
like
so
it's just so,
talented.
yeah, he is amazing.
But we were talking about, like, how with Ozai specifically, we were talking about Ozai.
Yeah, no, like you know how like, well, they're just like they're siblings, but like they're so different. Like
Hmm.
Ozai from the beginning was kind of like, he seemed to be like evil, and like he never really changed who he was. But then Iroh had that change in him, and then I was like, was he like Ozai at the beginning? You know, 'cause when he, so we know that he was like talking to his dad. He was the older one. We know that because he lost his son in the war,
Hmm.
he decided to step down, not only as general but also, well, he didn't decide to step down, his dad decided that for him,
True.
via Osai influencing a lot of things, and
Hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, losing
what was
Lieutenant
that?
obviously was a huge turning point for him, 100%.
Yeah, but then I'm like, we also don't know anything about his wife, like,
We don't.
because I was like, wait, Lieutenant didn't just sort of like appear out of nowhere. Even though there is that, have you seen that meme where they're like, Tough is talking to Qatar, and Qatar's like, oh, you know, being a mother is like something that I really liked. And then Tough's like, I want to be a mother too. And they're like, well, you have to have a partner. Tough's like, nope. And she just picks up a rock and he turns into a baby. And I'm like, that did not happen to Lieutenant. Like, there must have been someone. So
I'm sure.
and okay, so and it looks like not only did he lose his son,
Hmm.
probably his wife as well at some point, whether divorce, separation, or death, because she's like never mentioned, not like not in the picture. So
Hmm.
it's sort of like an added you know, weight to that.
No, 100%. I mean, it is weird that we don't learn much about his wife. I know we learn about a bit of Ozai's wife because, Azula and being Azula's and Zuko's mother. But it is
Yeah.
strange that we only hear about, we only see Lieutenant. Obviously, he was a big part of him, but like we don't see much about Iroh's wife, or that whole situation. Like, where is she? What happened? Like, it really is actually really weird that we never see her or hear of her really.
Yeah. So, you know, one of the things a lot of people have a lot to say about the live action. I don't know if you've seen the live action yet.
I haven't yet. No, not yet, but I plan to.
Okay. So there is this one scene. In my head, I thought the live action was sort of like canon. Somebody online said it wasn't. At this
Mm-hmm.
point, it doesn't really matter because we don't have enough information, right? But there was this one scene where Iroh was like grieving, like it was during the funeral of his son, and
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, that's such an important thing, because like there was sort of like this interaction between him and Zuko, and then Iroh kind of like, he essentially, Zuko ended up lifting up like Iroh's like spirits. And then I know before in the in when I interviewed you about your own practice, we talked about how Iroh didn't really help Asula, even though Asula also needed support and help. He only
True.
focused on Zuko, right? And part of me is like, that's kind of, because I'm like, you know, he's one of my favorite characters, and I'm like, if he's that good to Zuko, like he should have. I don't know if he tried or not, you know, with Asula, but it just didn't seem like it.
I mean, listen, maybe I don't remember the lore very well, but it seems like that happened as a result of circumstance. he was with Zuko the entire time because he was with him on his journey to find the Avatar. So, which is a matter of, hey, I'm with you, and I'm either the second in command here or the one in command. Um, I get more opportunities to help you. Whereas he didn't have as much opportunity with Azula because he was on the road or on sea so much with Zuko in their very formative years as teenagers.
A little bit yes, but I think a little bit no. Because if I remember correctly, there was a picture, like a drawn picture that they found in Zuko's like summer home or something, where it
Mm,
was like Zuko, Iroh, and Lu playing. So ever since he was a baby, Iroh already loved Zuko a lot.
mm.
We don't know if it was like the same for like when Azula was a baby or not, but I assume there was sort of like a separation too, because he didn't lose his right to the throne until his son died, right? So then maybe by then he had already formed like a bond with Zuko that he couldn't really forget and didn't have a chance to do with Azula
Oh,
as
you know what
much.
this? You know what that brings up for me
Mm,
is I'm wondering if this kind of brings up a conversation in my mind of nature versus nurture. Because if you remember, when Zuko at one point when Zuko and Iroh were talking, Iroh said, "Oh, they're talking about Azula, like, oh no, she's crazy, like
yeah,
almost like she's a lost cause."
right, right.
So I'm wondering if he had this view of her, like, oh, I can tell from a young age, or I can already tell, much like my brother, oh, you're a lost cause. But Zuko, there's a chance. I'm wondering if maybe he has that viewpoint when it comes to this is just who you are by nature. I'm curious.
That would make sense. Uh, and again, I kind of like refer back to the live action because again there is a scene and like that scene at the funeral, and then there is another one when Zuko is already like, in like, I guess, recuperating from what his dad did to him, that his dad goes to visit him and
Hmm.
he kind of stands by, he's like, no, like, I kindness is a good thing, right? And I think maybe that's why Iroh kind of like in a sense sided with him, because okay, so as I was describing sort of like the connection that Iroh had with Zuko, and I'm like, well, Iroh also is an outcast. He had
Yes.
been an outcast for a while, and I imagine he essentially like following Zuko in his journey to find the Avatar was a way for him to also get out of there if he was treated badly by the people there, aka also his brother, who probably didn't value him. And like, I mean, it, because when you see the way that other people reacted or interacted with Iroh, they were very much dismissive of him.
Yeah.
They completely forgot how powerful he actually was, that he was the dragon of the West, and
Yep.
his like, military accomplishments. They just saw him as this like retired old man who had nothing else to offer, right? And then I'm like, oh, like all his experience and knowledge and stuff didn't just disappear because he's old.
He's one of the wisest people in the world.
Right. And like one of the things that I really like too, or the way that he was portrayed, is that, or to me, it seemed like he was unmasking. When he was with Zuko, he had that liberty to be as quirky as he wanted.
Yep.
Like he was just doing whatever he wanted. He was being silly. He was making faces. He was buying all of these things, making jokes, like not taking anything seriously. And part of it, I think, was sort of like to teach Zuko a lesson that all of these things didn't really matter in the grand scheme of life, because Zuko was very much focused on like, this is the only way that I could live the life I want, right?
1,000,000%.
And I think at that point, I think you're right. Like he kind of had given up already on his brother, and he was like, "No, like I don't think you know your father as well as I know him." So, but I appreciated the fact that he never said anything bad
You,
against
you know
his
what's interesting? I really do
dad.
wonder, like you said, he was when he was banished. Like, I think it would have been very possible for him to become another Ozai. I think that failure at Ba Sing Se, him losing his son, as terrible as it is, that kind of is what I think allowed him to become who he is. Because remember, after that, you said he was exiled,
Mhm.
and that's what allowed him to travel the world. Which is obviously how then he learned to redirect lightning because he studied the waterbenders. So he traveled the world. He talked with various people. He met the other nations, talked to people, and he became a more well-rounded person. Which, as we know, when you become more of an empathetic person when you talk to people of various different cultures, religions, creeds. And I think that's what allowed him to do that. I think if he would have stayed in his bubble of the basically the fascist empire that was the Fire Nation, he might have become another Ozai potentially if that's all he would have been surrounded by.
Maybe, but you know how he got this title of Dragon of the West because he killed the last dragon, essentially. Or that's what everybody says. But he actually had the same experience because as Zuko and Aang. So he was sort of like one of the first ones, and I think that probably was sort of like the start of his change. Almost in a way, I see him as like Zuko was very young and he was very much like, I want to go back to my family. I want to be proud of like my nation and what my nation is doing or whatever. And then when he was traveling around, he realized what his nation was actually doing. And
Mm,
then slowly sort of like started changing his mind. And then he started realizing what actually was important in life and to people. And I kind of want to say that maybe Iroh had a similar experience when he encountered like the dragons and realized what firebending was actually meant to be, because at
mhm.
this point they were not really using it as anything good. They were just using it to like conquer the world, right? And
True.
it's not like they were like, because what was his face, the one that started the whole war,
Oh,
uh
Sozin?
Sozin, yeah, he was kind of like, oh, we have to share all the good things about our but they were not sharing all the good things about their kingdom or whatever
No, that was
ruled the world.
propaganda.
Yeah, so I'm like, okay, maybe if you actually were, helping people and like all the stuff, maybe I would have had a different opinion, but they weren't. So I do not. So, and maybe I think that's kind of how Ira started looking at. I think the last straw for him must have been when his son died. And maybe by that time he no longer had his wife or partner with him. And then he realized, hey, my son is dead. And like this whole thing that we have been brought off, essentially, he was being groomed to take over the throne for his dad, right? But it was not what, like, he realized it didn't matter. Like he was losing his son, he lost his son, and he's like, must have other people must have also. But I think there was, okay, so I'm gonna ask you a question actually.
Okay.
What did you think is the one thing that sort of, okay, it's probably not a one thing, but one of the things, main things that kind of switch people? Because like you said, he could have just gone like, oh, my son's dead, I'm just going to raise the world, because it was, the Earth Kingdom that essentially killed him, right? But
Mhm.
instead he sort of like took it as the opposite, as like, this is an opportunity for me to change. And like then the next thing that happened was with Zuko, and he's like, okay, it seemed like he was very much wanting to for Zuko, because he had this idea, like his intention was not to return to be like the Fire Lord. He wanted to put Zuko in the throne, right, as the Fire Lord. So I was like, why, like, how did that plan formed about for
I
him?
think honestly, the way that I interpret it
Mhm.
is that listen, when you're a general, it's a part of war that you're going to lose soldiers. Like, okay, so almost it kind of reminds me of that thing from Shrek. I think it was Farquaad who said, "Some of you may die, but that is a risk I'm willing to take." Eh,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So kind of like in that, where listen, I know some of you are going to die, but it is what it is, and you're just soldiers. That's what you are.
Right.
But my son, excuse me, my son, that's something else. Now that my son died in this, now I'm starting to question, why are we doing this? What is one of this war that my son is going to die? And I think that might have been the very first domino. I mean, obviously, it was the first domino that really led him to being different because it was my son. Now it's home. That's what I think. That's what really is the big difference there. Did I
But
answer? Did I answer your question?
no, yes, but sadly, I think that's sort of like what happens a lot, right? If there's something going on politically, like IRL, like in real life,
Hmm.
politically, or like, like some discrimination or something is happening in the world, we're kind of like too busy trying to like survive or to pay attention to these things or to advocate for these things or to even know what's happening. And a lot of, and it's not until it's actually affecting us that
Yes.
we're like, oh wait, no, actually this is a good cause, like this is something we need to like discuss, right? And sadly, it's we are in a way so oppressed by everything else that's happening in our lives, that it's difficult for us to be like, yes, I understand that this is like a cause that's worthy, sometimes I struggle with this because I do have sort of like a social media platform, not
Hmm.
as big as other people, but then they're like, there is a person that I follow. They were a parenting page, and they started advocating a lot for what's happening in the with two different countries in the Middle East right now,
Mm.
and there is a lot of like, why aren't you doing something about this? Like, you should be doing something. And then I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm busy trying to like survive here. Like, I have no energy to make this into a thing. To be fair, she is calling out, or they are calling out people who are in really well-known sort of like established situations, like very famous people, to like speak up about this. To do something. And then I'm like, and then sometimes we have that argument of like, why are we trying so hard to meddle in like other countries' business when our own country is like, hurting
Yes.
as well? And I'm like, it's just, one does not negate the other, right? Like both
Right.
are true, and we can only do so much. We can only have so much energy to fight for a specific cause at any given time.
No, 100%. And I mean, that's there is that I almost maybe a saying story. I don't know what the term is. There was that person who wanted to change the world, and that was too hard. So he tried to change just his state, but that was too hard. So he tried to change his town. That was too hard. His neighborhood. That was too hard. And he eventually got to just trying to change himself
Hmm.
and focusing just on yourself. And he could do that, but it was hard, but he could do it.
Hmm.
It's important to focus on what you're able to, because you can't take on everything all at once. It's impossible. Yes, what's going on in that part of the world is one thing. There's a going on in Eastern Europe right now. It's another part. There's the things going on in our own country and in other countries. There's things happening. You can't be a part of every single conflict, because saying as a therapist, that is not conducive to a good mental health. It's it doesn't work. You need to be able to compartmentalize a little bit. That I need to focus just on myself for right now. Now, if I have other things, if I have more energy, okay, yes, now I can start to focus on things outside of myself, and I can pick. Okay, what do I feel most passionate about, that I want to help? Okay, I want to, and we branch out. It's like the ripples when you throw a stone into a pond.
Hmm.
Ripples. Let me start with me. Let me start with my family, then my neighborhood, now my community, now my state, now my country, then outside of my country.
Hmm. And essentially, I I totally brought this up because he circled back to Iroh. Sure, it was part of my massive plan, but that's kind of essentially what we see happen with Iroh, right? Like, he was dealing with a lot of things, and eventually he was like, I can only choose one. So he decided to, like, I can't. Like,
Yeah.
even I feel like probably the whole weird thing that Ozai did to like get the throne, like, if he would have like asked Iroh would have been like, no, probably not. I don't think Iroh would have given it to him. But I think Iroh saw that he just didn't have what it took to be able to change. And also there was a lot in his past, also that would have like just made it really weird.
Hmm.
Um and I think even then he already sort of like understood what needed to happen in a way. We don't know when he got involved with the White Lotus Society as well, or
We
like
don't.
how far back like that started.
But it's interesting we say, like, about, like, he could have changed. Well, he could have tried to change things, because I remember when they were in the last season, when they were all talking over, I think around the bonfire, planning their final attack,
Hmm.
and Zuko was like, hey, Uncle Iroh, why don't you take on the Fire Lord? You could probably beat him.
Hmm.
And I was like, I probably could, but it's the Avatar that needs to do this. And I think partially, yes, because obviously he believes in destiny and all of that, 100%. But I think also because, listen, if I take down the Fire Lord, that's not necessarily going to change the society. If the Avatar does it, that will be the change.
Hmm.
And I think he understood that, just to further comment on what you were saying before.
No, yeah. Yeah, I remember that as well. And I like the fact that he did that. And then so so I actually I think um I was in a panel, an Avatar panel, for a convention in LA. I forgot which one.
Hmm.
No, it was not WonderCon. It was the other one. It doesn't matter. Point being is that we're talking about Avatar, and a therapist is sitting next to me talked about like the three sort of steps of an act, like doing an actual apology. And one is sort of like realizing your mistake. The
Hmm.
second one is, asking for forgiveness, saying you're sorry, apologizing. And the third one is trying to make something like trying to change so it doesn't happen again, right? And then so he cited as Uncle Iroh's doing that because he essentially like he spent a lot of his life trying to take over Ba Sing Se as like
Hmm.
a general, and then at the end of his towards the end of his life, not at the end of his life, like he actually took it back from the Fire Nation, right? And allowed the Earth Kingdom its sort of like freedom of its capital.
It was kind of a redemption in a way, a literal redemption arc.
Yeah. So he he kind of had that, and I think he also learned too, like along the way, because he had interactions with like, and I think I really love this sort of tidbit that they would put in there, where he had interactions with pretty much every single one of like the like Avatar group, in a way, and either offer freedom or like silent support, just standing there. Like I remember there was at one point he was standing like next to Katara or something, and he was just kind of like chilling there, and like actually there was like a fight, like his people, quote unquote, like were trying to capture them, and then he's just standing there like, what's up, like, like I'm not doing anything, I'm just like, here, whatever. It was in key moments that he did try to like intervene, right? Like
100%.
when Azula attacked them, or when Azula was trying to convince Zuko to come back home, that his
Mhm.
dad had recalled him or something, and he knew that was probably not the case.
Oh yeah, it's like I know how shit works. There's something's fishy here.
Yeah, yeah. So he tried to convince. So like, and I just really like the fact that there's this one quote that he says that he said like, "I know he's lost, but like if he needs me, I'll just be there." And I'm like, that's such a good parenting hack. Like sometimes you just need you let your kiddos go and explore the world and try and fail. Like I think that's one of the big things. We don't want people to fail. And even as therapists, we don't want like, the people that we're working with to feel like, like they're failing, or we want them to be successful. I mean, like, that's the whole point. We
Yes.
kind of like became therapists in a way, but also sometimes we kind of have to step back a little bit and be like, give it a shot, and if it doesn't work out, I'll be here and we can, like, come up with a second solution
Right.
to that.
But
So
it's also it's more than that. It's also like, yes, I'm also here letting you know this you want to do this, that's really fine. This is probably how it might go, but you can try it out, see how it works. But also just natural consequence. Going back to parenting, what you were saying
mhm.
before, like something I've had more than once when dealing with teenagers from their parents is like, oh my God, this my teenage boy, this 13-year-old boy doesn't want to wear deodorant. Like, how do I get him to do that? I'm like, don't. Let him go to school without wearing deodorant and let him find out what happens. And I guarantee you, he will start to wear deodorant. So, and that's part of it. It's you need to be able to fail. You need to have those natural consequences sometime for you to learn and grow. And that's part of what made Iroh so amazing, because he had those natural consequences, and some of them were worse than others, but
Mm.
it helped him to grow as a person. Obviously, it's terrible that they happened to him. You don't want someone to have to go through that. But that's a part of post-traumatic growth as well that we can also touch on. And Zuko also had some of that post-traumatic growth with all the shit he went through. And there's a phrase I like to say, a lot of my patients, like, oh man, why do things have to be so difficult? And I say this not as almost like not to invalidate their feelings, but to help them understand is that, when you think of a sword, for example, steel is forged by a hammer. It's not forged by a feather. So part of becoming a stronger person is going through adversity and hardship.
It sucks though. It sucks having to do that.
It does suck. It does suck, but it makes us stronger, and it's then up to us. I guess going to the therapy part of it, is okay. We had this really terrible thing. Where do we go from this? Like, let's take Iroh. Iroh's son died. He could have he could have been Bossing Say. Yes, yes, we started this war. Whatever, doesn't matter. They killed my son. I am going to raise Bossing Say to the ground. There is going to be a crater when I'm done with it. He could have easily gone in that direction, but he didn't. He was more, what's what I'm looking for, self-reflective, and he tried to go into a place of more peace, more kindness, more loving, and tries to help the next generation with Zuko try to embody that as well. I see in your face that maybe you're disagreeing a little
No,
bit.
like I think am I remembering correctly or not? Did Because I know that Suko redirected lightning to his dad after the whole eclipse happened,
Yes.
and like you could see like true fear, and I was like, did Iroh do that the first?
He might have, or so there's one of two ways. Either one is like a triggering, like, oh my God, I remember when Iroh did this, or two, oh wow, this is my most powerful attack, and you just redirected it. I'm now scared of you because I have less power over you.
True. I saw a meme. Now my information just comes from memes.
Welcome to the internet.
Yes, but I can't recall whether or not like Iroh did that or not to Ozai, or Ozai saw it happening. But like it just sort of like made me wonder, like, okay, let's talk a little bit about some of the reasons why we think Iroh didn't turn into a second Ozai and why Ozai did turn into evil Ozai.
Honestly, obviously we don't change because of one thing, but if I had to boil it down to one thing, it was his exile.
Okay. Okay.
I think him traveling the world, talking to other people, learning from them, allowed him to grow as a person. And again, like I said before, if he would just stayed in the Fire Nation and just been in that echo chamber, basically, he might have gone even more with the propaganda and become a second Ozai. But I think because he branched out, he talked to other people, got other perspectives, and had this very complex, very multicolored ball of yarn, he was able to become a more well-rounded person.
It makes me wonder because there seems to be a big gap between their ages,
Mm-hmm.
between Iroh and Ozai.
Hmm. I mean, that's a good question. Do we know how old they were?
No, but I mean, like, Ozai's good looking and not a white hair in sight.
No, for real. Oh, I just Google it. So a common one I see. So Iroh is in his 60s, while Ozai is in his mid 40s. Okay, that's quite a gap.
Okay, okay. So see, this makes me think too that maybe Iroh had been like a general, like you were saying, for a very long time, which meant that he had to be out and about in the world. And I
Yeah.
want to say I kind of recall a time where Iroh was
Mm,
telling him, "Oh, when I was like a general or whatever, like I encountered like these people or whatever." So I think partially is okay. Here's the thing. So I think there are, you talked about post traumatic growth, right?
hmm
And part of that is having sort of like um this not only like innate skills sometimes, but also this sort of like support systems in sort of in place in order
hmm
for that to happen, because otherwise it's possible, but it's a
Mm,
lot more difficult, right? So in a sense, we know that Iroh was probably married, right? We don't know how supportive wife was or not, but he
mm,
had a son. Son was good. They had a good relationship. He also really liked Suko. And we also know that he probably encountered the last two dragons and learned from them what like the real meaning
mm,
of like firebending was, right? So all
true.
of these things are already sort of like seeds that had been planted along the way. And he, as a general, he was able to travel around, like you said, like he encountered like different perspectives, realized what was actually happening, and that the Fire Nation wasn't actually improving the world as they
True.
thought.
Well, I want to
Instead,
add to what you're saying a little bit. I just want to add
okay,
one thing in terms of the support system.
uh-huh.
We don't know when, like you said, but I would say maybe the White Lotus Society also played a part in that as well.
Big, yes, also true. It makes me wonder who created it though. I wonder if he
Mm.
was, because I kind of like see, I get my information from like fan fiction and like memes. So a lot of what I'm be saying is like wrong, and also my brain tends to like make up information and blend two different fandoms together
So
sometimes.
here's the thing. I would venture to say that he is responsible for creating, and not by himself, but that he is responsible for creating. And here's my reason why. We know from the flashbacks we saw Iroh and Ozai being very competitive when they played Pai Sho, which Iroh plays all the time, and the White Lotus Society is named after the White Lotus piece in Pai Sho. So I think that he was responsible partially in creating it.
I think so too. And yeah, that's what I was trying to get about. But I'm like,
Mm.
just take everything I say like with a grain of salt. Except when it comes to mental health, I know a little bit more about that. I'm more trained and experienced in that.
Dr. Sanchez.
Yes, but yes, so I think he had like that, right? So he had people that he cared about. He knew what it felt like to lose someone, right? So
Mhm.
he knew sort of like the natural consequences of war. He knew what it was like to be backstabbed essentially by your
Mhm.
own sibling who
Yep.
probably never really liked you to begin with, and what it was like to sort of essentially have like a new family, because he had his own family like outside of like, you know, his dad and brother, and he kind of started creating another one with Suko. And
True. And they got
uh
backstabbed by Zuko.
yeah, yeah. And but I think because he realized like what it could have been like living with Osai, he was like, I don't think Suko actually like means it, kind of. There's still hope for him. Dude, that scene where Iroh is like in jail and Zuko goes to visit him, and then like the way that they like make it seem like it's actually like Zuko that's in jail because he's the one that we see through the bars and not Iroh, was amazing. I
Beautifully
loved
done.
it. Yes. And again, just like that sort of like quiet, like protest from Iroh. Like he just didn't say anything. He just kind of, he was like, this is a good opportunity for you to try to figure it out, right? But like it's not like he was like, all right, Zuko, sink or swim, here you go. No, he like, because he sent that message, right? For him to like look at
Yes.
his ancestors and stuff. And so again, that's probably something that he knew as well, right? Like he knew sort of like where that family came to be, and
Mhm.
probably why he really wanted Zuko to be in the throne, because he had more, essentially more going for him.
True.
You know. But okay, one thing I really like about Uncle Iroh is that he knew his limits. He's like, bruh,
Mm.
I'm old, I have a lot of things weighing on me. I would not be a good fire lord. Somebody else
Maybe
can
that.
do it.
Listen, for an old man, that didn't stop him from being a one-man army when he broke out of jail.
Exactly, right? But that's my point. And I'm like, he could totally do it. Just because a lot of people forgot like how strong he actually was, didn't mean that his strength diminished in any way. Like, I mean, we saw what's his face? Uh the Earth Kingdom guy.
Oh,
Boomy. Yeah.
Boomy.
Boomy, he was like all old and crippled, whatever, and then he started fighting. He was like, check out my muscles,
Crazy
right? And he
powerful.
was strong. He was so strong. And I'm like, bro, okay, like Iroh could have totally like been like, yo, let's finish this, let's end this. I don't want none of this to happen. All right, Zuko, you're up next, right? But he didn't. He was just kind of like, nah, none of that would work. And okay, listen. Another thing that I absolutely love is that Iroh was like, I already have my retirement plan, and that is to have my own tea shop.
Yes. The Jasmine
Right.
Dragon.
Yes. And one of the things that I absolutely love about it is that he, okay, so that's kind of like another strength that Iroh had. He had interest outside of like who he was, right?
Oh,
As a
100%.
like as an heir, right? So that also sort of like, I think, played a role of him sort of being able to use sort of like, or have post-traumatic growth after his son died, and just the way that he related to people. I mean, it was probably like personality as well. Like he just seemed to be just a much kinder person than
No,
his brother.
100%. No, he really was because like I feel like Iroh embodies literally every positive trait that you want to see in a person. That, they're resilient, they adapt to traumatic things, that post-traumatic growth. Um, he he's a mentor to those that are younger than him and trying to train them, have them become better people. He's very wise.
Has
Um,
good boundaries with himself and other people.
and he's not afraid to say he doesn't know, like that famous thing, when he's in the tunnel with Aang. He's like, listen, I don't know, but like keep going, you'll find something, but I'm not gonna pretend as if I know, which is great for us therapists, by the way. We
Mhm.
don't always have the answers, and that's okay. We don't need to be the sage on the mountain that knows everything. He has incredible emotional intelligence. um and he's also, and also he incorporates some spirituality into his life too, which helps to guide him as well. The whole thing with the koi fish. I remember that
The,
happening.
and the knowledge and understanding he had of like the spirits, right?
So like he just like this embodiment of like everything of what it means to be a well-rounded person. Like he is, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and
Yeah,
and the top is self. He is the self-actualization that we all strive to be.
yeah. Okay, you know what this reminds me of though, because we started talking about like the spirit world. Um, you know how in Star Wars, Obi-Wan becomes part of the Force,
Yes.
right? And so does Luke. And I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
it wasn't like,
So does Yoda and Qui-Gon Jinn too. Yeah.
yeah, it wasn't like they were automatically in there because especially for like what's his face? Obi-Wan. We saw the struggle he went through, right? Like there was like he made a lot of mistakes. He was like, oh no, let me try to fix them. He didn't really go about doing it my preferred way, I would say, of like fixing that. But he was like he learned so much, right? And then he was able to like connect like spiritually. And I think that's sort of like the journey that we saw as well with Uncle Iroh, where he was like, yo, I made it this far because like you were saying, like all the things that I had to overcome in my life, right? It wasn't like I was just born and handed all these things and like, I'm just a nice person, because they are really kind people out there that just innately, sometimes most of us, we have to work at it. We
Yep.
have to be like consciously aware that we're making a decision to be kind to ourselves and to
Mhm.
other people,
True.
yeah. And so I'm like, it wasn't for like nothing, and I'm assuming he also had like a lot of training in terms of like, firebending. He was
Oh,
enough
sure.
enough where he was able to invent a new technique. So I'm like, yeah, okay,
I mean,
yeah,
I mean,
he
to be
was a
fair,
master at it.
he was a prince, so he had the privilege of probably having the best tutors and teachers in the entire nation.
True, true, true. So, but again, like even when he was born with like all of that, he still had to struggle in order to reach that, like the little pointy top of the pyramid, like you were saying, right? And then so sadly, what happens in our society is that, if you want to reach the little cap at the top of the pyramid, you have to go through a lot of hardship. You have to overcome a lot of things. But
Yes.
if you are not born with all of those things, with all those things like already put in place, it's a lot harder because you have to constantly be like, okay, I need social support, I need good friends, I need good like I need good mentors, I want to become a good mentor, right? Like we need all those things to sort of happen. And sometimes it is like comparing someone who comes from like, like generations of wealth to someone who lives in like the hood, right, who does not come from generations of wealth,
Hmm.
and doesn't have any of like the social supports, like, maybe it's a single parent household, maybe it is
True.
both parents but neither of them is often at home, so there is no like good sort of like adult figure in their life. Like it
Hmm.
all just gets harder and harder, and we just kind of, sadly, we just kind of give up because it really is really hard if we don't have help, right? So Iroh had help. He didn't do it on his own. He had the White Lotus sort of like society. Whatever.
Yes,
Go ahead.
yes. I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt. I just
No,
want to
it's
put
okay.
a caveat to that. So here, so I go. My mind goes to when he was exiled,
Mm,
and maybe I'm wrong, and I'm maybe wrong. I feel like when he was exiled, he at that point he wasn't given any help. Like he wasn't like, hey, here's like whatever the equivalent is of $2 billion during
mhm,
your exile. I think during that time he had to survive on his own and figure it out. And during that exile, when he was looking, he's traveling the world, he either found by chance or he was looking for those people who became members of the White Lotus and the
mhm,
people in the various nations who he learned from. So yes, you're right. We definitely need mentors, 100%. And we should have programs that, that first off, that, hey, we want to help you,
mhm.
but it goes both ways. It's yes, and they need to be available, but at the same time, you need to also look for them. So, like for
Yes.
example, as therapists, we're here, we offer the services, but you need to seek us out.
Yes, yes, you need to put like a little bit of your part, because I mean, essentially, yes. Um, So not only did he have like certain things like already in place, because even though he was exiled, he had sort of like all the knowledge and experience that came from being in that position, right?
Yep.
And so that in a sense drove him to be able to do that, um, or to recognize that there was other options available to him,
Yes.
right? it
Yes.
it's we saw it happen too, because essentially like Katara and Ahsoka, they kind of came from like the opposite world, where it was like a really rundown village. Both of his parents died.
Mhm.
One didn't die, left for some
Mm,
reason or another. They were sort of left with grandmother, but they had grandmother, right? So they had
yes.
that support to essentially guide them. But they have to find their own way. They had to find their own sort of like inner strength.
Yeah.
Otherwise they could have only made it so far, right? So that's what I'm trying to say. And I'm like, whether you are born from wealth or not, your outside help takes you so far. And like if you are very like motivated, like self-motivated and self-driven, again, that can only take you so far. If you have the two, that is the best, and it will
Yes.
take you even farther than that, because there you can count on more support and more options available to you, right?
1,000,000%. And I agree with you. You need
Yep,
mentors.
yep.
And again, whether you're born into privilege or not, if you can find mentors, if you can find people that can help you, it helps you to spread your wings that much easier. I mean, I tell my patients, I work with a lot of mostly younger adults, so like,
Mhm,
18 to 25. And I say, like, listen, whatever this thing you're going into, whether it's medicine or it's business or it's, I don't know, whatever other thing there is, try to find somebody who is in that business, is in that area, and try
mhm.
to learn from them. Try to have them take you under their wing, because that is the best way that you'll be able to learn and become the best that you can be in that, the most self-actualized that you can be in that one area.
Pokemon. Um, yes. Uh, Wait.
Which
What
is a
was the
large reason
question?
why I post what I post on my Instagram. Like, it's a bunch, like, I just sorry, I a big thing that I want to do. I love teaching, and I
Mm,
want to help new therapists and student therapists to be able to become the best therapists they can be. So like a lot of the content I'm posting now is directed mainly at them, because I want to improve the mental health system. I want to make therapists better therapists, and I guess I'm taking some responsibility on it myself to try to help them to become that. I want to be that mentor.
I think we all get to a point in our lives where we realize that we have the opportunity to do that.
Hmm.
Whether or not we take it, that's up to us. But I
Yep.
think there's so much we can learn, because I remember one of my supervisors said, "You have a lot to offer." At that time, I was like, I know nothing. I'm a nobody. I just started learning how to do therapy. Like, what did you want me to do? But as I grew, I'm like, actually, yes, I had a lot of experiences, because, like we said, even if you are not like, you don't have all that experience, and when it comes to therapy, you have your own personal experiences, and
Hmm.
that counts for a whole lot of stuff,
No,
right?
it really
So
does.
and that's what I tell, like, because I do a lot of community presentations for mental health. That's sort of like my way of trying to reduce the stigma. And
Hmm.
I often tell people, I'm like, listen, I don't have any I talk to parents a lot, and I'm like, I don't have any kiddos of my own, and I'm like, I can offer you the knowledge and some of the experience that I have, but you also have a lot to offer. Like, you have the experience actually having kiddos, like multiple of them, so like you can also share. And that's what I tell people. I'm like, I'm trying to build this sort of like support group, essentially. And I'm like, you can just come here, and if I don't know the answer to something, maybe somebody else has experience, maybe somebody else has valuable insight to offer. I'm like, I do not. I'm just kind of like wanting to get the whole thing started, but it really is up to you guys to build that community, right? And that's kind of like what we're talking about. Like, in one of the things that I love about the Avatar show is that we see a lot of sort of like um new families being formed, right? Like, we see
Yes.
obviously in the main like protagonist, but also like Zuko and Iroh, they sort of formed their own like tiny family and adopted everyone else essentially, and then Uncle Iroh became everyone's Uncle Iroh.
Yeah, and,
you
and,
know
and then
in, in
Zuko made his own family, like
in
actual
the
family with
show
Gino.
and outside of it, because like even now, like just calling him Iroh feels so weird. He's Uncle Iroh.
He's
He
Uncle
there
Iroh.
is Yeah, that's just
Well,
that's
to be
just
fair,
weird.
it's because just Iroh is now Zuko's son.
Oh, that's true. That's true. But also, he's just so weird. He's Uncle Iroh, you know what I mean? And I think that I think too, a lot of like cultures where you say uncle or auntie to people who are just like not blood related, but they're like close to the family or whatever. It's not. It's kind of like a title given out of respect, right? And I
Hmm.
feel like if anybody, like he is one of the characters in the show that kind of earned, not like deserves it, but like he earned it, by everything that he tried to do. Um, so
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
because he he
I don't know.
he because he put himself out there. I don't say took the risk. I don't know if it was much of a risk take, but he saw what he could do and that there are people that needed it, and he took it upon himself to be that person. And even if it's simply just sharing a cup of tea, like he did with Toph, just talking things out, or with that man that was trying to mug him. You know, he just wants the world to be a better place, not just well, one obviously because he is just a great person, but also two because he feels he has to redeem himself a little bit. That he's done so much harm, he's killed people in war, he's done bad things, and part of him wants to like, okay, I need to redeem myself a little bit. I need to fix what I did, and this is part of the way that I'm going to do it.
It makes me think, like, again, this is one of the reasons I think why a lot of us mental health providers were like, yeah, he's one of our favorites, because I mean he just provided that space, he just made tea,
Yeah, and he
good
just sat
tea.
down with you. Hey, let's just sit down and talk.
Yeah, yeah. And again, like just him standing in the sidelines, not doing anything, not interfering. He allowed pretty much everyone to grow. And like you said, like even at the time where like he was talking to Aang, he's like, bro, I don't know. Like he could have been like, listen, I am on your team. I want you to be able to do all these things. Like he could have like done that, but he didn't. He allowed them to sort of like come into their own. And that's not something that happens now. We have a lot of parents who it really does suck, because I realized, I think it was might have been my dad who told me this, that when it comes to we were talking about politics at that time, and he
Mhm.
said that what happens is that when one um president or politician swings really hard in one direction, in the next election that another person swings really hard on the opposite
Yeah.
direction, right?
Mhm.
And then I'm like, that's kind of that, in a way, that also is what happens through the generations, right? One generation is really on this side and the other is like,
Mhm.
nope, I'm never doing that. And then like that's why we see such huge contrast with like the different generations and their parenting styles a lot of the times, right?
Yeah, no, 100%. And Iroh seemed to have been able to have that kind of balance. I think part of the reason, I mean, this is my personal opinion, part of the reason I think that happens, whether it's, generations or, with presidents, political ideologies, I think it's because there's a tendency for us humans to look at just the negatives of a particular thing and be like, oh, these negatives, oh, it's all bad. So I want to go as far away from that as possible. It's like, no, are there bad things? Yes, of course there are. But there's also good things. And you can have both. You can have that balance. And that's something that Iroh really, if there's one word to Iroh, it's he's balance, he's wisdom. Well, yeah, I think wisdom is balance. I think that's the perfect way to put it. Wisdom is understanding balance.
Yes. And that's why I love it so much, because again, like it's all about balance, you guys. And I
Yeah,
say that all the time to my
it is.
clients. And I'm like, and I feel like really weird because I'm like repeating that all the time. And I'm like, but it really is. And I'm like, it's a balance like within yourself to be able to like, like push yourself enough, but also treat you with care and kindness. Right. Same thing. Like the way that you interact with people has to be a balance, just like Uncle Iroh did, right? He pushed people when they needed to. And like all of this, I feel like he learned through like, trial and error, right? Like I think in a sense he understood where he had gone wrong, like when his son died, and then he said like, okay, we still have a second chance to be able to do this, right? And like, oh my gosh, that scene where he was like, uncle, I'm so sorry, and then he
Oh,
said like, you never have to apologize, like you don't. Oh, I love that. But I saw this thing, um meme, where it was Suko, and then they were saying that Suko kneels 3 times and like to ask for forgiveness, and I think two of them are, wait, I think once is for Katara, one is like in front of everyone, and then once is to Iroh, and Iroh is the one that actually sort of like responded to the apology. Everyone else sort of like was like,
hmm.
whoa, whoa. What are you
Did he
doing? Like,
not
what's
did he
happening
not
here?
kneel to Ozai to ask for forgiveness, or to did he
Oh,
never do
sorry. It wasn't Katara then. Yes, it was Ozai when he was young, right? Before he kneeled to ask forgiveness then, and then it was to when he wanted to join Aang and train him, and then to his uncle, and his uncle was the only one that sort of like responded because his dad flat out denied it, and
it on
the
his face?
yes. He doubled down. Like he not only denied it, but also was like, here, we'll teach you something, about like asking for forgiveness or whatever. And there was in the live action we kind of see a little bit more of like where Ozai is coming from in terms of
Mhm.
like his parenting and what he's trying to do, and essentially like it is sort of like a little bit revealed that it is that kindness, that innate kindness that Zuko has, that he hates. He said like that's weakness. And then so like when he saw Zuko like kneeling, he was like, bruh, nah, like you just went from like being kind to like trying to save all these people from just being slaughtered for like no reason, because we just want that to happen or it's just convenient for us, to like demonstrating that you're willing to do it even to, like here. So like he was like, nah, you're weak, bro, and like let me teach you a lesson. And like, I mean, lesson was learned, but it was not the one that Ozai wanted him to learn. He learned like the value of like kindness and like doing the right thing. Yeah.
Right. I mean, he needed him to learn that because again, it really does go into that whole conversation of nature and nurture, and I guess how if Iroh does look at it that way, if there is a nature versus a nurture kind of a thing, like you were saying, how Ozai saw the kindness in Zuko and he hated that. Like the immediate thing that went through my mind was like, okay, that's a symbol of your mother, the kindness aspect, which then goes back to Avatar Roku?
Roku,
Yeah,
yeah.
Avatar Roku. And then Ozai is basically Sozin. So it's
Mhm.
Sozin hating Roku. And
All over
that's where
again.
my mind went. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, those parallels are amazing because so lately I've been trying to learn a lot about how sort of like our ancestors and like all of our history, even if we were not born yet, it's still affecting us today, right? So like that's kind of what we see in the show, like how it's affected, and like the struggle that Zuko went through because he had both of them, right? Like the good and the bad in sort of like in him, but it's sort of like history, like there's a thing like history repeats itself, right? Especially we're not willing to learn, and Zuko was definitely willing to learn. Like the other thing that I remember too is that um Katara and Toph had eventually sort of like retired, like in Korra. They were like, yeah, we'll teach you how to like do all these things, but like I'm essentially retired. I have nothing to do with the world. That's like young people thing, right? And then
Yes.
Zuko's like, let me at him, like where do I go fight, like what's happening, right? And I feel like that's something that he learned from Iroh, because Iroh was like old, frankly, and a lot of the times I was like, bruh, you need to sit down and chill a little bit, because one good fall and that's it for you, man.
At that.
And but he learned, right, that even though his uncle was like, old, like he's still willing to fight for what was right. And I think Zuko always had that sort of like wanting to, essentially like wanting to um improve what had happened, and or sort of like, I don't know if he sort of like for the rest of his life he took it as, because he was no longer the Fire Lord, so again he didn't
Yeah.
have to like, and it sounded like he hadn't been Fire Lord for a while.
Right. That's a good point, actually. I didn't even think of that.
Yeah.
There's actually just one question that was like racking my brain that I didn't actually get. I want to ask you because I didn't get a chance to ask
Oh,
you
sure.
because you asked me, but I didn't get a chance to reflect it at you. Why do you think that Iroh went the path that he did as opposed to any other path?
Well, for all the things that I listed, I think it's because he had encounters that significantly changed his life. Like he had all those sort of like seeds, I guess, like put in place. So he encountered the dragons. He, as a
Mm,
general, had the chance to travel around and see how other people lived. He
mm,
studied a lot. He seemed to know. He seemed to make connections with sort of like the right people that helped him change his mind. And like
mm,
those sort of like those were already sort of in place. So when his son died, he already had all those things, and it sort of like grew from there, right? Because now it was like, okay, now I understand that this is sort of like an urgent matter. Like I understand what it really is like to like live through a war and stuff. And I don't want other people to like live through it, where I don't want to be responsible for doing that to more families. So I'm gonna stop, essentially.
Right, but so I guess more specifically, like, because so he met all those people. He met the dragons and the White Lotus Society and all these other people. He met that after the war. I guess more so during
No,
the wars.
no, I think he no, because he was already the Dragon of the West when he was the
That's
general.
true. That's
Yeah,
true.
the Lotus people maybe was afterwards, after his exile or whatever, but the dragons he met before then. And I think it also has to do with his personality. I think he was kind of like Zuko, where he was just innately kind to people,
Mm,
and that he didn't have that fear that I think Ozai had. Like that was the other thing I kind of wanted to talk. Like we can't really talk about Iroh without talking about Ozai as well. Like everything that went wrong in Ozai's life. Like he didn't necessarily have like a good father. Didn't sound like, right?
true.
His brother was sort of like away fighting, being this really cool hero. He was probably afraid of being alone, right? And like the way that he dealt with that, it
Hmm.
brought him some consolation, I guess, to the loneliness. Some like, okay, I can do this kind of thing, but it didn't last. But instead of sort of like making it better, he just kept doubling down, I think. So when he, because I, from my understanding, I think he forced his wife to marry him, or
I don't remember.
I kind of want to say that he did. That there was this thing that said that she was forced to marry him,
Mm,
and he did
interesting.
it because he knew that she was Roku's whatever, like
I
daughter,
think granddaughter, granddaughter.
granddaughter. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
Grand-
he was like, this would give me more to stand on, right? So everything he did was sort of like to try to protect himself.
It was
And
all
I think,
politics.
yeah, but like again, like so even though he had like a wife, a partner, like he didn't, because he forced that on her, and like she probably hated him. And he
Probably.
knew that, right? So it wasn't a healthy, so he never really had like a healthy relationship per se,
Right. She
right?
wasn't a wife or a partner. She was a tool.
Yes, yeah. And then so like everybody sort of like he started seeing everyone like that, right? As a tool, like even his own kids. And he tried to shape them as best as he could. And he used them. Like he was like, oh, now Azula would demonstrate like how good she is at whatever, like, to his dad, to be like, I have two kids and
But
my son,
but
like,
not even that. Like even think like, yeah, Azula, you'll be the Fire Lord, but you're only gonna be the Fire Lord when I become the Phoenix King. Only
yeah.
when I'm above you will you get that.
Yes, exactly, right? And then so like one of the things, so this is completely off topic, but I'm gonna put it in here anyway. So I like listening to this one podcaster talk about sort of like crime in his podcast, right?
Mhm.
Because the way that they go about it describing is that they always talk about like what happened since child, right? And
Mhm.
everything that affected them. And one of the things that they say often is parents, watch how you're treating your kids, because that has an effect in when they grow up, right? One. And then the other one is like, just because they grew up like that or they experienced all the trauma does not mean that they could get away with all the horrible things that they did, because lots of people experience trauma and not everyone's out there doing horrible things, right? And
Right.
then so like that's the thing, right? So like even though I kind of understand why Ozai turned out the way that he did, he was essentially just trying to protect himself, but that does not excuse the fact that he started using everybody for his own benefit, right? And then so we see sort of like the contrasting, right? And then
Yes.
like Suko was the balance for the both of them, right? Like for Iroh and
Right. And that's part of our, I guess, I don't know if it's a curse for us as therapists, is that we can understand why someone becomes the way they do, even the most terrible people, even if it's Fire Lord Ozai, even if it's Jet, even if it's, regardless of who it is.
listen, I have a huge bias with Jet, so I'm like, no, he does not get any of my sympathy or empathy.
I can understand I can understand why Jet became the way he became. Doesn't excuse or doesn't excuse his behavior or make it okay, but
Mhm,
like something actually I have to, I don't say teach, but tell my patients all the time is, there's a difference between explanation and justification.
mhm,
And I can explain why Jet, it doesn't mean it's justified.
mhm,
But I think that's part of it. It's like, we can be like, oh yes, good, evil, and that's all there is to it. No, it's obviously a lot more gray than that. People become who they are based off their experiences. And so you're a bit more, I guess, sympathetic or understanding as to, okay, what happened that made you this way. And I guess, like you said, with Ozai, he didn't really have um any support outside
Mhm.
of his father, quote unquote. Same with Azula, really.
Mhm.
But Iroh did, and so did Zuko, and that's the big difference. That's what separates them, is they had support that wasn't just, uh, I keep saying it, the echo chamber that was the Fire Nation.
I know we're getting a movie soon of when they're like in their 20s and stuff. I wonder if Azula is gonna make an appearance because I seen a couple of comics where essentially Zuko's trying to like really hard like to reach out to her and Azula is like, nah, I don't know
No,
you, bro. But like she does. She
no, she
totally
does.
does.
But I really like. I know I keep bringing this up, but like, I can't get past the idea that it seems in Avatar there really is this idea of nature versus nurture, where it's like, you're born a certain thing. Like, again, correct me if I'm wrong on the lore. Not everyone is born with the ability to be a bender.
Correct.
Okay, so certain people are born to be benders, and then there's the Avatar, who you are born to be this. You cannot train to become the Avatar. You are the
Which
Avatar.
is yeah.
Yeah, you cannot train to become a bender. You can become a better bender, but you cannot train to become one. You just are one. And it seems that there's Azula, she's a lost cause. That's who she is. Regardless of what she had, this is who she is. Same with Ozai, but not Iroh, not Zuko. So it really seems that there's a lot in Avatar of almost like this deterministic kind of philosophy that undergirds a lot of it.
I think I knew that there were some people saying that Yue, the moon princess or the
Mhm.
moon essentially,
The, the,
she
the,
was
the moon
supposed to
spirit,
be
yeah.
the yeah, she was supposed to be the avatar, but because the cycle was essentially like put to a stop, that's why she was born like however she was born. It makes me think, and I was like, did you think maybe Iroh was supposed to be the avatar as well?
A lot of people could have been the Avatar. I mean, if you think about it, see, here's my problem with
I don't
that.
I don't know, maybe there wasn't enough time for Iroh. Maybe there might have been enough time for Zuko to become one.
So here's my problem with
Mm,
that is that I feel like that is trying to create a connection where there is one. Like, so for example, outside of, let's say Aang's not the Avatar. Take that away from him.
mhm.
What makes Aang special?
His view of the world.
What was different about his view that wasn't the view of the other air nomads? So that's my problem. Aang is not special. So it's like, oh, we have these two special people. They were supposed to be the Avatar because they're special. So that's why
No,
that
wait, no,
sounds
but
weird
there
to me.
was because I think Yang Sheng was the previous avatar that was an
An air
airbender.
nomad, yeah.
Yeah. But she was okay with killing people. She was like
Well,
hey, it needs to be done kind of thing. And Aang was like, no, wait, no, 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 no. Like there has to be a better way, right? And
Well, the thing is about
yeah,
so it's not that she was okay with it. It's that I don't like this. I hate this. But if it has to be
you
done, I
must be
don't have any other choice. And it's kind of like, when Aang was asking her for advice, she was saying all life is sacred, but there are exceptions to the rule, and it sucks, but this is one of them. But I think that for the most part, they say all life is sacred. Aang was just parroting as a 12-year-old what he was taught by the Air Nomad Society.
but you know what? It kind of makes me think too of this sort of like um idea that you were just born to be like the avatar,
It
right?
seems that way.
Yeah, but I mean yes, they are born like with these amazing powers and stuff, but I think they kind of in a way have to grow into the position, right? Because okay, listen, my big gripe with wait, what's his face, the fire the firebender avatar, what's his name again?
Roku?
Roku. Yeah, like, bruh, everybody evacuated the island. You could have just pieced out and left the volcano do what the volcano does and lived
Yeah,
and
there was no
stopped
reason
the
for it.
war. Like, why were you like doing all these things? You know what I mean?
There was no reason
And
for that.
yeah, there was no reason for that. But like he was very human about wanting to save his home, right? So like I kind of understand that in a way. And then there's like a lot of other things like because every one of the avatar the previous avatars that are called, they were like, yeah, we made a big mistake, and they were like all
Yeah,
human mistakes, right?
yeah.
Like they're all sort of like based on their personality style and stuff like that. And I think it wasn't until sort of like Aang and Korra that then they started realizing, hey, we have to work not only within the bonds of like our personality, whatever feels comfortable, but also what is best for everyone.
Yeah, that's the call to action, 100%. they grow into it 100%, but it's not like they were special before they became the Avatar. They were special more or less because they
Because
are
they
the
were the
Avatar.
Avatar. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. And then so that's kind of why I'm like, okay, so Iroh and like all the other sort of like White Lotus members, they weren't necessarily like super special about like how powerful they were, because I'm pretty sure there were other people that were powerful, right? But I think they became even more powerful because they had those ideals, they had those beliefs, and that support of like not only wanting to like change the world, but also like they understood what it was like to like lose, something like dear to them, and they wanted to prevent that from happening
Right.
again. So they've sort of like change, no, not change, I think they leveled up. I think that's what it was.
Mhm.
They all leveled up in their own way and continue to work like within their bounds, because remember, I mean, eh, honestly, Suko didn't have to teach Aang firebending. It could have been Iroh did it,
True. True.
you know um and or it could have been like the one guy, what is it, John.
Oh, John John.
Yeah, and I'm like, but just his personality was different. He was still going through that sort of like self-healing journey, and I
Hmm.
think Iroh got to very close to the end of it already, and then he but he wasn't, again, like he had those boundaries for himself where he was like, it's not my duty or my job to like help the Avatar, like, and it's not like he exactly knew that Zuko was gonna go ahead and do it. He just kind of knew that things were gonna work out, but he needed to focus, like we were saying earlier, like he can only focus on one thing at a time, and his
Yes.
focus was to save Say from his own nation, right? And I create sort of like the White Lotus Society.
Right, and that's part of it also is he had faith. He understood what was out of his control, and he didn't try to force a control over it. It's very like, acceptance and commitment therapy kind of a thing. He accepted where his limits were, and he's like, okay, I understand it. I don't like it. That is what it is. I accept it. I'm going to commit to what I do have control over.
Yes, and I really like that, and part of it is that he had hope in humanity. He had hope that somebody was going to do the right thing and it was going to happen, right? And even if it didn't, I feel like he kind of was like, well, I'm willing to fight, like I'm willing to like die on this hill, essentially, right? Like I'm gonna do whatever I can in order to do it. But I had hope that somebody would, like, things will sort of like fall into place as they should in order to bring that balance to the world again. And that's something that we struggle with, right? My anxious brain is often like, oh no, I have to do this, I have to do that, I have to help my siblings, I have to help my parents, I have to help my friends, right? Because my anxious brain is like, well, if you don't do it, no one else is gonna do it, right? But then, like, as my brother reminds me, he's like, I'm an adult now. If I want seconds or more food, like I'll just make it, or like, but I'm always being like, oh, there's food in the fridge, or like, are you coming home? Did you want me to make you something? Like, there's that sort of like that anxiety in my head. And I'm like, but it kind of like defeats the purpose, right? But if I were to have like that faith in humanity, or like that faith that he was going to do the thing and survive on his own for like a day, which he can, like, then
100%.
I wouldn't be anxious about it, right? But it's when we're trying to control all those things that we have no business trying to control, that's when we start seeing signs of anxiety, signs of depression, signs of a lot of things that.
Right. Yeah, and it becomes into the frustration. Like this goes back into what we were saying before. Like, hey, why aren't you talking about this issue? Why aren't you focusing on that? Well, because that's not where my main focus is. I have a focus on something that I have much more control over. And the reason they get frustrated with you is because that's them trying to exert control in an area where they feel they have less control.
Yeah, I mean, like, that's what happens in parenting too. Like, a lot of
Hmm.
the kids, when kiddos start talking back, is because they're trying to tell you something.
Yep. And it's a fear of a loss of control. Zuko redirecting lightning from Ozai. Oh my God, I'm losing my control. It's scary.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And it's normal, and the, it really is one of the hardest things for parents to do, which is understandable, which is, to understand, okay, you're no longer this helpless little pup. You're able to have more control, more agency, and I know you're going to get hurt. I know you're going to fail, and that hurts me. And the hardest thing is me allowing that to happen, not because, yes, obviously what happens to you, but obviously the way it makes me feel.
Mm-hmm.
And it's normal, it's human.
There's a lot of things that we do because it makes me feel better, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Your kids don't want your help, but you help anyway because it makes you feel better, right?
Right.
Or like even like we do the same thing with like friends. We help a little too much sometimes, and friends are like, you don't have to, and we're like, no, but I want to. Like, let me just do something. There was a when I was in undergrad, I volunteered at this daycare at my university, because I always like working with kids. And there was this one time when there was a kiddo that I think I don't know, like hurt himself falling from something or other, and there was this other kiddo, probably maybe understandable, he started crying as well. And the other
Mm,
kiddo that was not hurt, he just wanted to help, but he was overwhelmed with so many emotions and he didn't know what to do to help. But he had that innate, like, I need to help you, so you're calm, right?
yes.
And again, that's when we have to set boundaries, and that's what Iroh had to do, right? With Zuko, he's like, I know Zuko needs help, I really want to help, but I can't. Or like, like it's something that Zuko has to discover on his own.
You know what that reminds me of when it comes to therapy?
Mm,
You know the old joke of how many therapists does it take to change a light bulb?
yeah, yeah.
Just one, but the light bulb has to want to change. The same thing. I want to help you, but you need to show me that you want to change. Because if you don't want to change, then nothing I can do for you. It's the same
Yes.
thing.
Yeah.
And that's and that was their relationship, the arc in a nutshell.
Yeah, and again, it kind of goes back to, like, for me, like parenting, because a lot of parents are like, why is my kid, like, being so rebellious? Why doesn't he? And like, it, something is happening. Like, back off a little bit. Ask them. But a lot of the times, it's like, no, I know what's best because I'm an adult, or I want what's best for them, so I would do X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, sometimes they don't want that
Well,
slash need that.
so here's what I say with parents. You know how we were talking about before, how people really start to understand something when you bring it home when it affects them.
Hmm.
So what I tell them is, okay, I mean, were you ever rebellious, like even as a teenager? And usually they'll say yes. Like, okay, well, why were you rebellious back then? Well, because I want independence, yada yada. Is it possible they want the same thing? And so it really most people in my experience really
But Mark,
require you
you
drawing
don't
back.
understand. I allowed them to have independence, and they still back to me.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't get that. I didn't catch
It's
that.
like, I allow them to have independence, and they still talk back to me. That's what I get a lot from a lot of parents. They're like, and I'm like, well, maybe your idea of what independence is not the
No,
idea
no, I
of
understand that. So let me ask you: did you ever even once talk back to your parents when you had independence? Even once? Not even once?
I was too afraid. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. Um, I wouldn't consider like talking back because I'm too afraid of that.
Well,
And
you wouldn't consider talking back, but did your parents consider talking
uh,
back?
yes, that's why I would
Okay.
never do it.
Right, exactly. But they considered, I'm not saying you specifically, I'm saying like a general you. Um, and that, yes, that's what they considered, but you didn't see it that way. Is it possible that you see it as them talking back, but they don't see it that way?
Back in my day, Mark.
I understand, but and that's why I guess I'm like, listen, it's all about perception. And that's why I started talking about that, where, you know, you can always draw a parallel. Is it going to be one to one? Of course not. It's not going to be one to one. But the idea is not to um, have it be exact. The idea is to recognize a pattern. You can see four houses that are all different colors, but you still know they're all houses.
Yes.
That's what I tell my patients, and it really does. I'm saying all this basically to make the idea of it really helps our patients and people in general, in my experience, to bring it back to them and to make them think about themselves, because people tend to there's an unfortunate tendency that people need to think of themselves first before they're able to think of other people and be able to empathize.
And I think the problem too with that is that if you have a very fractured idea of who yourself is, or you are as a self,
Hmm.
then it taints the way that you interact and the way that you view the world,
Hmm.
right? So like that's essentially what we saw in Ozai and Azula. Azula
Yep.
had a very distinct way in which she thought other people viewed her, based on what she thought her mom. I think. Okay, so here's the thing. I think Azula could be redeemed, and she's still relatively young. She's still able to get that redemption, right? But again, she didn't really have anybody. to sort of like guide her. And because I think she knew what she was doing, what she was thinking was wrong, and she thought her mom judged her for it.
Hmm.
Right. And then, but she didn't know any other way because the person that she looked up to was her dad, who was also crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And was pushing her to do crazy things that were not helpful at all. And then because she knew that her friendship with May and Ty Lee was not the greatest, and the only reason why they were friends was because she was the princess and she forced them to like
And
continue
they
the
were scared of her.
and they were scared of her, and she knew that, right? So she just used that as a tool. So when she was confronted with the fact that the things that she believed would work didn't work, in fact Zuko basically threw in her face and was like, no, look at me, look at my life, like I was able to get everything you want by
Hmm.
doing the complete opposite of what you're doing. And that's when she just like lost it, you know.
It was you're right. It was everything that built up to it, and that was just the final domino, which just broke everything because it really did make her have to completely question her worldview and how things that in her mind the math wasn't mathin' to help her get the
Yes.
conclusion that she wanted is like it does not compute. What is going on?
Hmm.
But I think that there's the possibility of, I mean, I would hope. Because what's going through my mind is okay, we have two possibilities here. The first possibility is that, yes, she's just a victim of circumstance and she's definitely reformable, she's helpable, all this stuff. The other part of me is like, I wonder if she has a personality disorder.
Probably with the dad that she had, the way she was raised.
Right. And so that's not to say that people with personality disorders that there's no help for them. Of course there is. The question, of course there, I see the face you're making. Of course there is. The problem
No,
is that it becomes a lot more difficult.
I'm wondering if it's personality or if it's trauma.
Well, I mean, what's the difference?
Both.
What's the
Because
difference?
a lot of the things that we see develop um, into a mental health diagnoses, whether it's anxiety, depression, whatever, they come from somewhere, right? So essentially, what I will say is
Yes,
it
yes, and
came, yeah, so it came either from like, like genetics or sort of like the environment, the experiences that you had, a combination of both, you know?
Usually both because of epigenetics. So it's usually both.
Yeah. So I don't know. We go back to balance. So even if you do have that sort of gene in the family, but there is balance in your life because your environment was a good environment, you're trying to make it into a
Hmm.
good environment. Um, the effect it's going to have on you is not going to be the same as if your environment also was against you. You know?
No, 100%. It definitely helps to mitigate the chance of you developing a mental health disorder. It also helps to not just mitigate the chance of you developing one, but also if you were to develop one, it helps to mitigate the intensity of it,
Mhm.
how severe it is. And that's all 100% true. So there is a combination of, as we know now, there's a combination of genetics and environment, epigenetics and all of that. So I think honestly, when it comes to Azula, I think that she has the epigenetics more so than Zuko to have gone
Mm.
the way she did, and obviously was activated by her environment. So I definitely think that she can be helped. It's just a matter of her being open to it.
Yes, and from my understanding, because I think I've read like the first four comics that came out, but not anything after that yet. Yet,
Yes.
um, but I've seen some sort of like bits and pieces of it where she is kind of like helping like Suko in sort of like her own way, right?
True. Almost
Yeah.
like acting like a foil.
Yeah, yeah. Well, like she is like he's like she knows that that's like the right thing to do, so then she does it, but she's also kind of like very grumpy about it, like
True.
like she almost in a way like she kind of is wanting to change. But I think we have this, okay, I think part of the problem is that we have this expectation, right? So for example, we have a child like Iroh who becomes very wise and like the very tippy top of like the human pyramid of achievement or whatever, of needs.
Hmm.
And then we have the complete opposite, which is Ozai,
Yep.
right? And then we're like, wait, what happened there? Like, why didn't Osai also become, like as
Well, it's
wise and cool as
well,
Iroh?
well, it's nature or nurture.
Yeah. And but also personality, right? Like Suko and Azula have widely different personalities. So we can't expect her to like suddenly become a Suko double, essentially, right? Like she's gonna if she becomes good, she's gonna do good in her own way,
Yes,
right? It's not gonna be
you
like
hope.
exactly the same.
You,
What?
you definitely hope that she'll do good in her own
Yes,
way.
yes. I do hope. I have faith. I have faith
You have faith
in
in
her.
her. But to bring
She
this back to Iroh for a second, like
Mhm.
if there was one criticism I guess I would give about Iroh, it's that he wrote off Azula. She's like what six? She's what? She's the older sibling, right? Or she's the younger one?
She's the youngest.
She's younger.
Because
Okay, so
she's 14 in the show, and
okay, and
Zuko's like 16 or
Zuko's
17, I think.
16.
16,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So she's like 14. Okay. So yeah, to just write off a 14-year-old as oh she's crazy. Like there's no helping her. That's something I would criticize him over. That I think is a fault is where maybe he faltered a little bit. I think he could. I think she is helpable. I think he could help her. Um, obviously it would require her, to want that as well. But I don't think it was helpful to just write off this 14-year-old.
I wonder, part of me makes me wonder if it was sort of like just a thing that he said without understanding like how much of an impact it could have, because I think we tend to do that quite often. um but yes, I understand that. It's and I agree with you. And that's kind of like one of the things that I'm kind of like, Iroh is one of my favorite Avatar peoples, but also I'm like, he could have been better. But again, that's sort of like the humanity in people. We're
Yeah,
like, even if you reach to like, you know the wisdom, and you're considered to be like really wise and intelligent or whatever, you're still only human. You're still gonna
exactly.
make mistakes. You're still gonna, and I think that's something that we have to accept, not only for ourselves but for other people that we admire, because then that becomes a problem, right? Because we kind of have seen it in a few fandoms where we're like, oh, this person's really cool, and then we realize that we don't actually know them as a person. We created them in our mind thinking that they were cool because we like the work, or the,
Hmm.
whatever they created. And then so it becomes problematic. So we have to have that understanding that we are just human. And that's something that I emphasize whenever I talk to my clients, and I'm like, yo, I have a therapist too, I have ADHD, have anxiety, like I'm not perfect. And I'm like, and sometimes I'm like, hey, if you notice something that like, if you're just babbling for way too long, stop me. Like, don't be afraid,
Yeah,
like this is your time. And like I had a couple of people who were like, hey, can we talk about this one thing? And I'm like, yes, like this isn't my session, this is your session. We
yeah,
can do whatever. You want to play, we'll play the whole
exactly.
session. You want to talk about gossip about people, I don't know, we'll
Let's
talk
do it.
about gossip. Like this is whatever
Yeah.
you want to do.
It is whatever you want. And just to add on that, like I do the exact same thing. And I add like, listen, I'm human. I make mistakes. If I ever say or do something that like rubs you the wrong way, tell me. We'll talk about it, and we'll move past it. And that'll be like, okay, now I understand better. But like I'm not perfect. I'm human too. So like and it's okay to have those aspects of either people that we like, whether fiction or real, that yes, they're not perfect. I understand that. And that's okay. There's still that good in them. And I think that's something, yes, we do have that criticism of Iroh, that one thing. I think that of all the characters in the show, he is like the closest to like perfect that we could possibly get to in that show. Um, I'm trying to think like what else specifically about Iroh outside of that. I think that's really it in regards to like criticisms.
um I think part of me just wished he was a bit more active in certain things. He
Oh.
was very, very passive. He just kept waiting. And I think he waited a little too long sometimes for certain things.
Mm.
That might be my ADHD brain, but it's just freaking right now. Like Avatar could end, in like one season. It was just freaking told Zuko how horrible his dad really was, and how his dream is not the
So
best.
here's why I disagree with you. Here's why I disagree with you. I think that Zuko at the time, especially if we're talking about the earlier seasons, if that's what you're
Mm.
referencing, he was in the pre-contemplative stage. That's the only reason why I disagree with you. So I don't know. I don't know if he took too long. I think that he actually, uh, I think he did it the way that we need to do it, depending on because we need to meet our clients where they're at.
Yeah,
That's
but
the only
still,
reason I would disagree with you on that.
he could have done it faster.
I
Just
know.
could have ended it.
I, I know, but that's not where Zuko was at that time, unfortunately.
You know what that reminds me of? Like I just saw this like TikTok video where there was this guy who was like it was this girl and a guy that met each other, right? And then she had a necklace that dropped, and she picked it up, and he said like, hey, the necklace looks familiar or whatever. And she said like, oh, this necklace, it was like a good friend of mine who disappeared a bunch of years ago, and I don't know where he is. And he said like, oh look, I have one just like it, but I found it in the cemetery, so your friend is probably dead. And then like that ended like the whole like mystery of is my friend dead or alive, like I don't know, like like
Oh
that
my
ended
god.
right there. And I'm like, I feel like Iroh had that power to be able to do that, like to be able just to end it, I
I
mean,
I, I get
just
that.
taken down his brother and a lot of things would have been easier, you know what I mean? Like he
You
didn't
know,
have to kill
maybe.
his brother, you know what I mean? Like he just could have been like, hey yo, my dad is dead, yeah, you are Fire Lord, but you suck, so I'm gonna dethrone you and put a young Zuko in the throne.
I know. I feel like there's so many like I think how should have ended stuff like that where they say like, hey, they just would have done this, the series would have ended a lot quicker. Like just throw the ring in the fucking mortar. Like what are you hesitating for? Just fucking do it.
Yeah,
Stuff like that. But it's like, okay, but then we don't have the story.
yeah, and I think that's too that's one thing that I kind of sometimes become very frustrated with people, with like some of the fans in the fandom, where like sometimes I will post something, they're like, well yeah, but this, and I'm like, it doesn't really matter, bro, it's just a story. And I'm like, it has helped us a lot. Like I think I've gotten a lot of, like, I have these avatar posters that I absolutely love. And I had them for like 2 years now, I think. And every time I look at them, I just think about balance, right? And then that's
Mhm.
when I sort of like start reflecting on like my own life, and whether or not I have balance in my life and how I should do better and stuff. And I'm like, and I think for a lot of us, it has created that. But I'm like, okay, just because somebody identifies with a specific character or says something about it doesn't mean that you have to bring up that. Yeah, but Iroh kind of forgot about Azula. So is he really the best character? Like, I'm like, it's
Yeah, because
in general, because again, like he's also human. It just, it's not
but that,
perfect. It can be
I
perfect.
mean that kind of goes into a whole other discussion of like people like I said before, like, oh, there's this bad thing, therefore it's all bad. Like you
Hmm.
can't also acknowledge the good.
Yeah.
There are those people. I think it's, maybe I'm wrong. I feel like that's become a bit more prevalent lately, of this like very black and white thinking, and I don't know why. But that's a whole other discussion.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? We started talking about Iroh, and then we talked about everyone
I
except Jet.
mean,
She
well,
really
Iroh
wanted to.
never met Jet. Well, technically, he never met him. Jet saw him, but they never met.
That's true. That's true. That's true.
So I think that's
Um,
why.
so if you okay, we could like go on and on, but it's like beating like what is
Beating a dead horse.
yeah. I'm like, wait, that sounds right, but also wrong. Anyway, point being is that we are kind of
Trust
like going around
yourself.
in circles. We're going around in circles now. And we both agree that he is a great character, that there's so much we can learn from him, and that we will continue to use him in therapy for
Facts.
ourselves and for other people. And highly, highly recommend everyone to watch this series. So I am so happy that you ended up watching it. And I highly encourage. I had a friend of mine who we finally convinced to watch it, and she loves it. And I was
Yeah.
like, I knew it, I knew it. And I was like, I knew it. So yeah, so it's a very fun sort of like series where it's serious enough, but it doesn't take itself too seriously, which is what
It is
I
such a good team.
love.
It is such a good job. Should I give Cora another chance?
You know what we can do, since we're doing this, and we also want to do another episode where we talk about other characters. um I think maybe we should watch it and then come back together and talk about it, because I think that would be a good thing. Because, like I said, I have only seen it once, and one thing that I say is that I don't necessarily say think it's bad. I just think I had a really hard time identifying with Korra as a character, but I found it a lot easier to identify with like Zuko, Iroh, and like Aang, or like any of the other characters, right? So I just find it really difficult. But I'm like, maybe that I'm older, and that if I go in sort of like not wanting to be biased, I will see, you know,
And like my issue with
something
the show,
different.
like it wasn't that I didn't like Cora or anything like that, or any of the characters. It's not I didn't like the characters. I just felt that it just wasn't written very well. I wasn't a fan of the writing. But I felt the
Mm,
characters were fine. Just the writing. Like for example, one thing like, and I've been criticized for this take, and that's totally fine. I personally did not like Korra getting everything at the very end of the show, getting literally everything, all of her bending back and energy bending and the Avatar state in perfect control, like all in one go. Like I personally didn't like that from a writing perspective.
I wonder if they thought it was going to be sort of like the last of it. I mean,
That's what I
I
was told.
personally love happy ending, but I cannot wait because, from my understanding, they are doing an Earthbender Avatar next.
Fucking bet. I'll watch that.
That I think that's what is happening, and I'm like, yes, I would like to see where the story goes from here and how they take it, because
Yeah.
so far I have like really loved it. And I think one of the things I really appreciated about it is even though I don't really have that connection with Korra, the show, or the character itself, there's a lot of people who do, and then it just makes me so happy because they're part of the fandom, right?
Mm,
Because they are getting something off of it, and that's what I enjoy. And I'm like, it doesn't matter if we disagree on things, it's
yeah.
just if you're getting something out of it but I'm not, it's cool because I already got it like from the first show or whatever.
I'm totally fine. So, so yeah, if we want to do Korra, like, or any character in Korra, I'm willing to watch it. Past the first season. I watched the other seasons just to make sure, just to get myself familiar with it. But I'm willing to do that. Or honestly, it doesn't have to be Avatar. I'm willing to dissect any character from any media.
You're gonna regret saying that. Now we're gonna be meeting every single day talking about all the characters.
Well, you know
You're
what?
gonna stop answering my messages.
You know what? If you're watching this and you want us two therapists to dissect another character, put in the comments and we'll look into it.
Yes. If you have a character from Avatar, especially, or any other like show that you want us to like discuss a bit in depth, yeah, we will be all ears. That would be interesting to see
Yeah.
who we get in the
It could be
comments.
anyone. It could be the Joker. It could be Captain Jack Sparrow. It could be fucking I don't know, the Red Power Ranger. Anybody.
I will have to go back and like saw all of these things. I will be like, I know nothing about this. But yes, yeah, let us know in the comments, and let us know if you agree or disagree with our assessment of Uncle Iroh, or what you would have added to, or because I know, I think there's a lot of things that I enjoyed about him, and that I, especially like as a therapist. But if we missed something that we thought would have shared, like I'll also share that as well. And just overall, thank you, Mark, for proposing that we do this, and for joining me today on
Thank
your
you for having me.
for a free day to geek out with me, which I
I love
always
it.
appreciate. And thank you, listener, audience member, fellow
Viewer.
geek, for viewer, for making it this far, because we're close to 2 hours of recording, and I'm like, oh, we should probably end it now. So thank you for making it this far, and yeah, let us know your comments. I will have Mark's info, so you can check out, because you have been sharing a lot of Avatar stuff in your socials, so people can check that out. I will have all that information on the description of this post, and yeah, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. That way you know when we're showing the next Avatar thing, or any other panels or interviews that
Character
fun
analysis.
things that or character analysis that we do, because I do not know when that would be. So you and I will find out at the same time when it gets posted. So yeah, subscribe to Psych for Geeks, and or check out us on our social media. That way you also know like what's coming, or what other things we are also doing. And again, thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to reframe and re-enchant your life, and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye.
Bye.